In 1965, a 16-year-old boy walks through the gates of the Newport Railway Workshops in Melbourne for the first day of his apprenticeship. The site covers 130 acres. Around him, more than 5,000 men build and repair almost everything the railways need, from the streamlined Spirit of Progress locomotive to the very machine tools they cut their metal on. He has signed up for 4 years as a fitter and turner. He will learn the lathe, the milling machine, the micrometer, the feel of steel under a cutting tool when it is biting just right. An old tradesman, grey at the temples and missing the top of one finger, shows him how to bring a shaft to within 1/1000th of an inch by hand. No computer, no readout. Just eyes, hands, and 40 years of feel passed across a workbench. This is not just a job, it is an identity, handed down on the workshop floor, man to boy, the way it has been since the place opened in 1882. To understand what this country lost, you have to understand what the fitter and turner actually was. He did not lay bricks. He did not wire houses. He kept the machines that made everything else possible turning. In the factories, the foundries of Newcastle, the sugar mills of Queensland, the wool stores, the power stations, it was the fitter who found the fault in a broken gearbox, machined the replacement part in himself, and had the line moving again before the end of the shift. When something stopped, he was the man they called. And he always knew what to do. By 1989, Australia had 175,000 apprentices in training, the most the country had ever seen. A boy who finished his time could buy a house, raise a family on one wage, and walk into any workshop in the nation knowing his skills were wanted. The trade travelled with him. A Newport fitter could work in Wollongong, in Whyalla, in Kalgoorlie, in any town that still made things. The whole country ran on men like him, and most Australians never gave it a second thought. That was the point. When the work is done well, you do not notice it at all. Then the ground shifted under his feet. It started oddly enough, not in a factory, but in a classroom. In 1988, the Education Minister John Dawkins reshaped the entire university system. Going to university was no longer to be the exception. It was to be the goal, the marker of a successful child, the thing every good parent wanted for their son. And slowly, almost without anyone deciding it out loud, a message took hold in Australian homes. The clever boys went to university. The other boys went into a trade. For a father who had spent his life on the tools, it was a strange and bitter thing to watch. He had built a life with his hands. He had a house, a trade, a reputation in the workshop. And now he was being told, gently, by teachers and television and the spirit of the age, that he should hope for something better for his son than the life that had served him so well. The trade that had been a source of pride became, in the space of a single generation, the thing you settled for. The fallback, the path for the boy who was not quite good enough for anything else. The workshops felt it. Fewer fathers were steering their sons toward an apprenticeship. Fewer boys saw the trade as something to aspire to, and the men already in it began to feel the ground going soft beneath a thing they had always assumed was solid. Then came the harder blow. Through the 1980s, the governments of Bob Hawke and Paul Keating decided Australia had to open itself to the world. The Industry Minister, John Button, drew up his plans for the car industry and for steel. Those plans were designed to wind back the tariff walls that had protected Australian factories for generations. The argument was national efficiency, cheaper goods, a modern, competitive economy. On paper, it made sense to the men in Canberra. On the workshop floor, it meant something else entirely. Average manufacturing tariffs fell from around 15% in 1989 to 10% by 1993, then down to just 5% by the year 2000. Cheaper imported goods began arriving on the docks in volumes the local factories could not match. One by one, the plants that employed the fitters started to struggle. Then they began to close. The work that fed the trade began to dry up. Apprentice numbers fell away sharply into the early 1990s. The boy from Newport, now a man in his 40s with an apprentice of his own, watched younger blokes get knocked back when they came asking about a start. It was not that nobody wanted to learn. It was that there were no places left to put them. The factories that once trained a generation were letting men go, not taking them on. And then it reached Newport itself. In 1992, after 110 years, the Newport Railway Workshops closed. At its peak, the site had carried more than 5,000 workers. By 1990, only 300 were left. The boy who had walked through those gates in 1965 was one of the last men to walk out of them. The great sheds fell silent. The lathes that had machined a nation's locomotives were sold off, scrapped, or simply left to rust where they stood. The clock tower kept time over an empty yard. And across Australia, the same story played out in town after town. The car plants came later, Mitsubishi in 2008, Ford in 2016, Holden and Toyota in 2017. Every single closure took another generation of fitters, toolmakers and maintenance men with it, and took the apprenticeships that would have replaced them as well. The workshops that trained these men were turned into car parks, storage yards, apartment blocks with a heritage plaque bolted to the wall, explaining what used to happen there. For the men who survived the closures, something else was changing too, something quieter that few people noticed at the time. The big employers were gone, so the work that was left got broken up into pieces and put out to contract. A fitter no longer clocked on at a single workshop with 50 mates and a foreman and an apprentice coming up behind him. He became a sole trader, a man with a ute, an ABN, and a phone that had to keep ringing. For a while, the money was good, better than good, because the skills were getting rare and the rates were climbing. But there was a cost buried in it that only became clear years later. A man running his own contracts, chasing the next job, watching his own overheads, has no room to carry an apprentice. He cannot afford 4 years of paying a boy to learn slowly and break things and ask questions. The old workshops could absorb that. They had the size, the steady work, the older men with time to teach. The lone subcontractor has none of it. So the chain that had passed the trade from one generation to the next, man to boy across a workbench, quietly broke. Not because anyone meant to break it, because there was no longer anywhere for it to happen. Now, here is the part that should make every Australian stop and think. Today, this country cannot find enough of them. Metal fitters and mechanical tradesmen sit on the national skills shortage list, year after year, with no sign of it easing. Employers all say the same thing. The experienced men are retiring, and there are nowhere near enough young ones coming through to take their place. The few who remain often go out on their own, running their own contracts at premium rates, because the competition has simply disappeared. The man who once would have had 10 mates in the same trade now has the whole job to himself, and he can name his price. A country that used to train its own tradesmen now flies them in from overseas on skilled visas. We gave away the workshops, gave away the apprenticeships, told a generation of boys that this kind of work was beneath them, and then went looking for the very skills we had thrown out. The boy from Newport is in his 70s now. He kept this country running for 40 years. He machined the parts, fixed the breakdowns, trained the apprentices, and asked for very little in return except the dignity of a trade that mattered. And he has lived just long enough to watch his country pay top dollar for a skill it decided, quite deliberately, that it no longer needed. Australia did not lose these men by accident. There was no single disaster, no flood, no fire. It happened. Decision by decision, signature by signature, in offices far away from any workshop floor. A minister in Canberra who thought every boy belonged in a lecture hall. A trade deal that looked good in a spreadsheet. A factory that closed on a Friday and never reopened. None of it felt like much on its own. Together, it took apart something that had taken 100 years to build. The men who kept this country running were not beaten. They were simply told, one quiet decision at a time, that they were no longer required. And only now, with the sheds silent and the lathes gone, and the tradesmen flown in from the other side of the world, are we starting to understand what that actually costs. If you remember when towns like this still made things, and you want to see more of these stories told properly, subscribe and stay with the channel. There are plenty more still to come.